Live fearlessly, find your inner strength. A Survivor's Guide to Thrive Beyond Cancer. Chapter 1, The First, A Biotechnologist's Dream. The first, in my life begins with curiosity about life, about the intricacies of human existence, and the marvel of nature. From a young age, I found myself fascinated with science, especially with how the human body functions. Little did I know then that this deep-rooted interest would one day be central to my survival. Chapter 2, The Second, The Misdiagnosis. Life has a way of changing in an instant, when everything you know is thrown into chaos, and all you have left is the will to survive. For me, that moment came on an ordinary day, with a simple lump near my neck, seemingly harmless, barely noticeable, but enough to prompt concern. Chapter 3, Facing Cancer Head-On. Chemotherapy is like war, waged not only against the disease but also against your own body. It strips away your strength, your appearance, your dignity, leaving you raw and vulnerable. Yet, somehow, you must rise and fight, day after day, even when every cell in your body screams for surrender. Chapter 4, Lessons from the Battlefield, Surviving Cancer. Emerging from the battlefield of cancer was not like the triumphant endings we see in movies, where the hero stands victorious, untouched, and whole. No, surviving cancer felt more like crawling out of the wreckage, scarred, exhausted, and forever changed. But it was in this wreckage that I found something unexpected: clarity. Chapter 5, The Third, Becoming a Healer. Cancer had given me a new lease on life, but it also left me with questions, deep, unsettling ones. Why had I developed cancer in the first place? The doctors had done their best to treat my disease, but they couldn't answer the question that gnawed at me day and night. Chapter 6, Finding the Root Cause. For years after my cancer treatment, the same question echoed in my mind: why did I develop cancer? It wasn't enough for me to accept that it happened. I needed to understand the cause. Was it genetic? Was it bad luck? Or had I unknowingly set the stage for the disease through my lifestyle choices? Chapter 7, The Healer Emerges. Stepping into the role of a healer was not something I had planned for, but rather something I was drawn to, an inevitable result of my journey through illness, recovery, and discovery. Chapter 8, A New Life, The Struggle to Find Love. After surviving cancer, I thought I had faced the toughest battle of my life. But what I didn't anticipate was the silent war that would come next: finding love as a cancer survivor. Chapter 9, The Fourth, Becoming a Father. Becoming a father was a moment that changed everything. When my son was born, it felt like a new chapter of my life had begun, one filled with hope, wonder, and a sense of purpose I had never known before. Chapter 10, Embracing the Future. Fatherhood had changed me in profound ways, but it was only part of a larger journey. As I settled into my role as a parent, healer, and survivor, I began to realize that everything in my life, the battles I had fought, the lessons I had learned, was leading me toward a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly live. Chapter 11, The Philosophy of Healing. As I entered this new chapter of my life, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, the battles I had fought, the lessons I had learned, and the transformations that had occurred within me. My understanding of health, of healing, of life itself, had shifted dramatically since the day I was first diagnosed with cancer. Chapter 12, Connecting the Dots. As I sit here today, looking back on my life, I see it not as a series of isolated events but as a tapestry of interconnected moments, each one forming a larger picture that I couldn't see when I was living through it. Chapter 1. Chapter 1, The First, A Biotechnologist's Dream. The first, in my life begins with curiosity about life, about the intricacies of human existence, and the marvel of nature. From a young age, I found myself fascinated with science, especially with how the human body functions. Little did I know then that this deep-rooted interest would one day be central to my survival. The summer heat hung heavy in the air as I walked across the campus of my university. My final year of studying biotechnology was drawing to a close, and the excitement of what the future held had me moving with purpose. I could feel it in my bones. I was on the cusp of something great. As I sat in my cell biology class, I was lost in the complexities of cellular communication. Each cell in our body, I learned, is a universe in itself, a complex network of signals, communicating in the tiniest fractions of a second. I found this utterly mesmerizing. We spent hours poring over cell diagrams, molecular pathways, and biochemical interactions. My classmates often complained about the workload, but for me, it was different. The more I learned, the deeper my appreciation grew for the delicate balance that sustains life. It was as if I was gaining a glimpse into the blueprint of creation itself. In the laboratory, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines and the sterile scent of chemicals, I worked with my team on our final project. Our task was to design a molecular structure of a protein that could potentially target a type of cancer. We meticulously studied how mutated DNA in cancerous cells wreaked havoc on the body, and the ways in which these rogue cells defied the natural signals meant to trigger cell death. It was here, in the cold glow of fluorescent lights, that I first began to understand the war that takes place inside the body, a battle between health and disease, life and death. I had chosen biotechnology not just for the science, but because I believed in its power to heal. I wanted to be part of that fight. As we modeled proteins and mapped out cellular mutations, I felt a quiet thrill. It was a strange mix of fear and exhilaration, fear of the unknown, of what diseases like cancer were capable of, and exhilaration that science could hold the key to defeating them. I never imagined that one day, that very knowledge would become my personal lifeline. Outside the confines of the lab, life was simpler. My friends and I would gather in the evening, chatting about our future plans. Some wanted to pursue further studies, while others were eager to dive straight into the workforce. The air was always charged with optimism and youthful ambition. We felt invincible, as though the world lay at our feet, waiting for us to make our mark. I still remember the day one of my professors pulled me aside after class. "You have a keen understanding of how the body works, Nataraj," he said, his eyes filled with a seriousness that caught me off guard. "If you keep following this path, you'll make real contributions to science." His words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I spent long nights at the lab, poring over textbooks and working on my project. My dream was to contribute to the fight against diseases like cancer, to help unravel the mysteries of human biology and find solutions that could save lives. At the time, I didn't realize how intimately personal that battle would become. The more I learned, the more connected I felt to the idea of healing. In the quiet hours of study, as I delved deeper into the complexities of cellular communication, enzyme reactions, and the brilliance of organic chemistry, I started to see the human body not just as a collection of organs and tissues, but as a masterpiece of design. Every process, every reaction, was perfectly orchestrated to sustain life. The way carbohydrates and proteins were broken down into simpler molecules like glucose and amino acids, the way cells communicated almost instantaneously, all of it felt like a symphony playing in perfect harmony. Yet, even in this perfection, there were moments of chaos. Cancer was the ultimate disruptor, throwing the body's intricate balance into turmoil. But with every discovery we made in the lab, I felt a glimmer of hope that someday, the answers would come. I had no idea then that my own body would one day be at the center of this chaos, that I would experience firsthand the devastation of a cellular rebellion. The scientific concepts that I was now studying so eagerly would become the weapons I'd use to fight the biggest battle of my life. As I sat there one afternoon, flipping through pages of research on mutated DNA and signal transduction pathways, a thought crossed my mind: what would it be like to face this illness? I quickly brushed it aside. I was young, healthy, and full of life. This was academic, theoretical, something that happened to others, not to me. But life has a way of connecting dots in unexpected ways. I had no idea that the lessons I was learning now would later form the foundation of my survival. In the months and years to come, I would look back at this time, at these lessons, and realize how everything had been preparing me for what was to come. Back then, though, my focus was solely on my studies. I spent my days immersed in textbooks and scientific papers, determined to contribute something meaningful to the world. Little did I know that the knowledge I was gaining would one day save my life. As I walked out of the lab that day, feeling the cool breeze against my skin, I looked up at the sky with a sense of possibility. The world was wide open, and I was ready to make my mark. But what I didn't realize was that the world had its own plans for me. Plans that would test me, break me, and ultimately, transform me in ways I could never have imagined. And so, the first dot of my life was drawn, my fascination with the human body and my dream of being part of the fight against disease. It would be many years before I would look back and see how this dot connected to the others. But for now, I was content in the knowledge that I was exactly where I was meant to be, on the verge of something greater than myself. Chapter 2. Chapter 2, the second, the misdiagnosis. Life has a way of changing in an instant, when everything you know is thrown into chaos, and all you have left is the will to survive. For me, that moment came on an ordinary day, with a simple lump near my neck, seemingly harmless, barely noticeable, but enough to prompt concern. I still remember the first time I felt it, a small swelling just below my right ear. At first, I brushed it off as nothing. I was in my mid-20s, healthy, and deeply immersed in my career. I had recently started working as a lecturer, using my biotechnology background to teach students about the human body's complexity. My life had momentum, there was no room for anything else. But the lump didn't go away. Over the next few weeks, it lingered, persistent, like a quiet whisper trying to get my attention. And so, on a rainy afternoon, I made the decision to visit a doctor. I didn't expect anything major, perhaps a minor infection or something benign. I was still young and invincible, or so I thought. The doctor was an older man, with a weary expression and a rushed manner. He took one look at the swelling, ordered a biopsy, and diagnosed me with tuberculosis. His certainty was startling. "It's nothing serious," he said casually, handing me a prescription for TB medication. "Start the course, and you'll be fine in a few months." I nodded, trusting his judgment, though a small voice inside me nagged with doubt. TB didn't seem right, but I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this was just a minor setback, something that could be fixed with a few pills. I started the medication, expecting my health to improve, but instead, things took a darker turn. The pills made me feel worse. Day by day, my body began to betray me. I felt weaker, more fatigued than I ever had before. The lump grew larger, and to my horror, new lumps began to appear, first on my neck, then under my arms. They spread like wildfire, overtaking my body, and with each passing week, my strength ebbed away. I went back to the same doctor, frustration seeping into my voice. "Something isn't right," I said. He glanced at me, unconcerned. "These things take time," he replied. "Stick to the medication, and you'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. In fact, I was getting worse. Every morning, I woke up feeling like I was drowning in my own body. The simplest tasks, like getting out of bed or brushing my teeth, felt like climbing mountains. My skin was pale, my muscles weak, and my mind clouded with exhaustion. And still, the doctor remained insistent that it was TB. Months passed, and my health spiraled further out of control. I lost weight rapidly, my energy completely depleted. One night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, a sense of helplessness washing over me. Was this it? Was my life really falling apart at 25? I had so much ahead of me, and yet, here I was, stuck, terrified, and deteriorating with each passing day. My family was equally concerned. My mother watched in silent fear as I became a shadow of the man I used to be. We had no answers, only the false hope that the medication would eventually work. But hope began to fade as the symptoms became too severe to ignore. It was then that I decided to take matters into my own hands. I needed a second opinion, someone who could see beyond the misdiagnosis. I made the decision to travel to Chennai, to consult with a more experienced physician. It was the last shred of strength I had left, but I knew I had to do it. The drive to the hospital in Chennai felt endless, every kilometer a reminder of how far I had fallen from the vibrant, healthy person I once was. When I finally arrived, I could barely sit upright in the waiting room. The other patients around me seemed equally fatigued, their eyes weary, their bodies frail. But something in the air felt different. This place held the promise of answers, of solutions. When my name was called, I was ushered into a room where a physician greeted me with calm professionalism. He asked me to recount my symptoms, my medical history, and the treatments I had undergone so far. I told him everything, the lumps, the medication, the constant fatigue. He listened carefully, his brow furrowed in thought. After a long pause, he spoke. "I don't think this is tuberculosis," he said, his voice steady but grave. "We need to run some more tests." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Part of me felt relieved, finally, someone who didn't dismiss my suffering, but another part of me was terrified. What if it was something worse? The tests were conducted quickly, but the waiting felt like an eternity. I sat in the hospital room, watching people come and go, my mind racing with possibilities. The fear gnawed at me, a deep, unsettling anxiety that I couldn't shake. Then, the doctor returned, his face a mixture of concern and determination. "You have lymphoma," he said, the words cutting through the air like a blade. "Stage 4. My heart stopped. Lymphoma. Cancer. Stage 4. The words bounced around in my head, refusing to settle. This was not the answer I had expected. The shock was overwhelming, like a tidal wave crashing down on me, leaving me gasping for air. "How long have you had these symptoms?" he asked. I told him about the misdiagnosis, about the months wasted on TB medication, about how the disease had progressed while I was taking the wrong treatment. His face darkened with understanding. "You were likely at stage 1 when this all began," he said. "But now, it's spread to your small intestine and lungs. We need to act fast." The weight of his words hit me with full force. I had cancer. And not just any cancer, but stage 4 lymphoma, the final stage. The misdiagnosis had allowed the disease to grow unchecked, spreading throughout my body, turning what might have been a manageable situation into a life-threatening crisis. I didn't know how to react. There were no tears, no outbursts of anger, just a quiet, numbing realization that my life was now hanging by a thread. The doctor spoke of chemotherapy, of aggressive treatments, of the possibility of survival. His words were clinical, practical, but I could see the gravity of the situation in his eyes. As I left the hospital that day, clutching a folder of test results and treatment plans, I felt as though I was walking in a dream. How had this happened? How had my life come to this point? Just months ago, I was a healthy young man, filled with hope and ambition. And now, I was staring down the barrel of cancer, my future uncertain. The drive home was a blur. My family was waiting, anxious for news. When I told them, the room fell silent. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and my father stood frozen, trying to process the reality of the situation. I had never seen them look so vulnerable, so utterly broken. But even in the midst of this devastating news, something inside me stirred. A small, defiant voice whispered that this was not the end. I was not ready to give up. I had studied biology, genetics, the complexity of the human body. I understood cancer in ways that most people didn't, and I knew that while the odds were stacked against me, this was not an impossible fight. I would fight. I had no other choice. And so, the second in my life was drawn: cancer. It was cruel, it was overwhelming, and it was terrifying. But it was also a test. A test of strength, of resilience, of the will to survive. And as I prepared to face the battle ahead, I realized that this, painful as it was, would ultimately connect to something greater. I just didn't know what that was yet. Chapter 3. Chapter 3, Facing Cancer Head-On. Chemotherapy is like war, waged not only against the disease but also against your own body. It strips away your strength, your appearance, your dignity, leaving you raw and vulnerable. Yet, somehow, you must rise and fight, day after day, even when every cell in your body screams for surrender. The first session of chemotherapy was an experience unlike anything I had ever imagined. The hospital was stark, clinical, anything I had ever imagined. The hospital was stark, clinical, with the sterile scent of antiseptic hanging in the air. Rows of patients sat hooked up to 4 drips, their faces pale, their expressions tired. The room was filled with quiet conversations, the occasional cough, and the steady hum of machines. I had prepared myself as much as I could for the battle ahead, but no amount of research, no amount of academic knowledge about cancer could have truly prepared me for the reality of what was to come. I knew about the science behind chemotherapy, the chemicals designed to attack the rapidly dividing cancer cells, to disrupt their growth, to eradicate them from my body. What I didn't know was how deeply it would affect every aspect of my life. As I sat in the treatment chair, the nurse gently inserted the needle into my vein, connecting me to the 4 bag. A cold sensation spread through my arm as the drugs entered my bloodstream, and I braced myself for what was to come. I kept telling myself that this was necessary, that every drop of medication was a step closer to survival. But it didn't make the experience any easier. The hours passed slowly, the chemo dripping into me like a slow, toxic poison. I could feel my body reacting, the nausea creeping in, the fatigue settling over me like a heavy blanket. By the time the session was over, I was utterly drained, barely able to stand. My family, who had come to support me, helped me out of the hospital, their faces etched with concern. The drive home was a blur. The landscape outside the car windows passed by in muted colors, and my mind felt detached, like I was floating outside my own body. I could feel the chemo doing its work, but it was not just targeting the cancer, it was attacking everything. Every muscle, every nerve, every organ felt like it was under siege. Once home, I collapsed into bed, too exhausted to even change my clothes. The nausea came in waves, crashing over me again and again, until I could do nothing but lie still, waiting for it to pass. I tried to sleep, but the discomfort kept me awake, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. What if this didn't work? What if the cancer was too far gone? What if I didn't survive this? But even in the midst of the physical torment, I refused to let my mind surrender. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to give up now. Cancer might have invaded my body, but it wasn't going to take my spirit. I clung to that thought like a lifeline, repeating it over and over again in my mind: I will survive this. The days following the chemotherapy session were some of the hardest of my life. My body felt like it had been hollowed out, every ounce of energy drained from me. I had to force myself to eat, to move, to breathe. Even the simplest tasks, like getting out of bed or walking to the bathroom, felt like monumental achievements. But I pushed through, one painful step at a time. And then, just as my body began to recover, it was time for the next session. The cycle was relentless: 2 weeks of chemo, followed by a brief period of recovery, and then back again for more. Each time, it felt like I was being stripped down to nothing, only to be rebuilt slowly, painfully, in the days between treatments. Throughout it all, I continued teaching. It was the one thing that kept me grounded, kept me connected to the world outside of my illness. I would schedule my chemotherapy sessions on the weekends, so that I could take a few days to recover before returning to work. On Wednesdays, I would drag myself into the classroom, exhausted but determined, and stand before my students, delivering lectures on the complexities of biotechnology as though my life wasn't falling apart behind the scenes. I didn't tell my students what was happening. To them, I was the same Nataraj, their passionate, energetic lecturer who loved teaching them about the wonders of the human body. They didn't see the struggle it took to stand in front of them, to smile, to pretend that everything was normal. They didn't know that just days before, I had been lying in a hospital bed, barely able to lift my head. But in a way, teaching became my escape. For those few hours, I could forget about the cancer, forget about the treatments, and immerse myself in something I loved. It reminded me of who I was before all of this, the young man with big dreams, the scientist who wanted to make a difference. It gave me a reason to keep fighting. The doctors were cautious with their optimism. My cancer was aggressive, and the treatments, though necessary, were brutal. Each scan, each test result was a moment of anxiety, a question mark hanging over my future. But slowly, over the months, there were signs of progress. The tumors began to shrink, the cancer cells retreating under the onslaught of the chemotherapy. It was working. I clung to that hope with everything I had. Each small victory, a positive scan, a reduction in the size of a tumor, was a step closer to survival. But I knew the road ahead was still long, and the treatments were taking their toll. My hair was the first visible casualty. I had been warned about the side effects, but nothing prepared me for the moment when I saw the first clumps of hair falling out in the shower. It was shocking, a visceral reminder that I was no longer in control of my body. Soon, my scalp was bare, the last remnants of my former appearance gone. I would look at myself in the mirror, my pale, gaunt face staring back at me, and sometimes it was hard to recognize the person I had once been. The cancer had taken so much, my strength, my appearance, my sense of invincibility, but it hadn't taken my will to live. The weeks turned into months, and the months into a year. My life became a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and brief moments of recovery in between. There were days when I felt like I couldn't keep going, when the weight of it all felt too much to bear. But every time, I reminded myself of why I was fighting, because I had too much left to do, too much left to experience. Slowly, miraculously, the tide began to turn. The cancer, once a looming presence in my body, was being beaten back. The doctors were astonished at my progress, commenting on how well I was responding to the treatment. "Your recovery is nothing short of remarkable," one oncologist told me. "You're defying the odds." I smiled weakly, too tired to respond. Defying the odds was all I had been doing for the past year. But as the cancer retreated, I began to see the world differently. The small things, like the taste of food, the warmth of the sun on my face, the sound of my mother's voice, became precious in a way I had never appreciated before. I had faced death, and I had survived. And now, every day felt like a gift. My body, though scarred and weakened by the treatment, was healing. I was healing. And with that healing came a new sense of purpose. Cancer had tried to destroy me, but instead, it had given me a new perspective on life. Everything I had gone through, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, had taught me something invaluable, that life, no matter how fragile, is worth fighting for. And so, the third, my life was drawn, facing cancer head-on, enduring the brutal fight, and emerging on the other side with a new understanding of strength, survival, and the power of the human spirit. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Lessons from the Battlefield, Surviving Cancer. Emerging from the battlefield of cancer was not like the triumphant endings we see in movies, where the hero stands victorious, untouched, and whole. No, surviving cancer felt more like crawling out of the wreckage, scarred, exhausted, and forever changed. But it was in this wreckage that I found something unexpected, clarity. When the doctors first told me that the chemotherapy had worked, that the tumors had shrunk and my cancer was in remission, I was too numb to react. I had spent so long in survival mode, just trying to make it through the next day, the next hour, that I didn't know how to process the news. I had been fighting for my life for so long that I almost didn't know what to do with the idea of survival. But as the days passed, and my body began to recover, the reality of what I had accomplished started to sink in. I had survived. I had faced the monstrous disease that had ravaged my body, and I had come out the other side. It wasn't just the chemotherapy that had saved me, though that had played a crucial role. It was my understanding of the body, my knowledge of biology, and most importantly, my mindset. From the very beginning, I had refused to see myself as a victim. Even in the darkest moments, when the pain was unbearable and the fatigue felt like a crushing weight, I reminded myself that I had the power to overcome this. I knew how my body worked, how cells communicated, how the immune system functioned, how the human body had an incredible capacity to heal itself. This knowledge was my secret weapon, my mental armor in the fight against cancer. I often thought back to my days in the lab, when I was studying the complex mechanisms of cellular function. I had spent countless hours learning how the body's systems were designed to protect and heal. I knew that cancer cells, though dangerous, were not invincible. They thrived in environments of weakness and imbalance, but with the right treatment and a strong mindset, they could be defeated. This understanding gave me a unique perspective during my battle with cancer. While most patients understandably felt fear and despair in the face of such a diagnosis, I approached it as a challenge, a problem to be solved. I knew that my body had the tools to fight this, and I was determined to give it everything it needed to succeed. Of course, that didn't make the journey easy. There were days when I questioned whether I could keep going, when the physical toll of the treatment felt too great. But in those moments, I turned to the knowledge I had gained from my studies. I reminded myself of the intricate processes happening within my body, the way my immune system was working tirelessly to heal, the way the chemotherapy was targeting the cancer cells. I visualized my body as a battleground, with my cells fighting bravely, and I believed, with every fiber of my being, that victory was possible. But beyond the science, there was something even more powerful that kept me going, my mindset. Cancer is as much a mental battle as it is a physical one. The disease wears you down, not just physically, but emotionally. It strips away your strength, your confidence, your sense of control over your own life. It would have been easy to fall into despair, to let the fear take over. But I refused to let cancer define me. I knew that my thoughts had a direct impact on my body. If I allowed myself to be consumed by fear, anxiety, and hopelessness, it would weaken my immune system, making it harder for my body to fight the disease. So, every day, I made a conscious choice to focus on the positive. I practiced gratitude for the small victories, for the moments of relief, for the support of my family and friends. I reminded myself that each day I survived was a day closer to recovery. And slowly, but surely, I began to heal, not just physically, but mentally. As the months went by, and my body regained its strength, I realized that surviving cancer had changed me in profound ways. The things that had once seemed important, career success, material achievements, the pursuit of perfection, suddenly felt insignificant in the face of what I had just experienced. I had stared death in the face and survived. Everything else paled in comparison. I remember one evening, sitting outside as the sun set, feeling the warmth of the light on my face. It was such a simple, ordinary moment, but it felt extraordinary to me. I had spent so long trapped in hospitals, surrounded by the cold, sterile environment of cancer treatment, that I had forgotten the beauty of the world outside. The breeze on my skin, the rustle of the leaves, the distant sound of children playing, it was all so vivid, so alive. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for surviving cancer, but for everything. For the knowledge I had gained, for the support of my family, for the strength of my body, even after it had been pushed to its limits. I had faced the worst that life could throw at me, and I had come through the other side stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of life's simple pleasures. It wasn't just my body that had healed, it was my mind, my spirit. Cancer had forced me to confront my own mortality, to face the fragility of life in a way that most people don't have to until much later. It had stripped away the distractions, the trivial concerns, and left me with a clear understanding of what really mattered. And with that clarity came a sense of purpose. I had survived for a reason. There was more for me to do, more for me to learn, more for me to give. I knew that the lessons I had learned through my cancer journey about the power of the mind, the resilience of the body, and the importance of a holistic approach to health could help others. I began to think about the people who weren't as fortunate as I had been, the patients who didn't have the knowledge or the mindset to fight as I had. I thought about the people who gave up in the face of cancer, who didn't believe in their own ability to heal. And I knew, deep in my heart, that I wanted to help them. I wanted to use my experience, my knowledge, to inspire others to fight, to believe in their own strength, to see cancer not as a death sentence, but as a challenge they could overcome. This realization planted the seed for what would come next, the next phase of my life, the next, to be connected. But for now, I was content in the knowledge that I had survived, that I had won the battle, and that I was ready for whatever life had in store for me next. The doctors continued to monitor my progress, amazed at how quickly I had recovered. Each scan showed improvement, each test confirmed that the cancer was retreating. And with each passing day, I felt stronger, physically, mentally, emotionally. By the time I was officially declared cancer-free, I was no longer the same person who had walked into that hospital all those months ago. I had been through the fire, and I had come out transformed. The Nataraj who had once been consumed with career ambitions and academic success was gone. In his place was someone who understood the true value of life, who had learned to cherish every moment, who had discovered the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of challenges. And so, the fourth, my life was drawn, surviving cancer, learning the lessons it had to teach me, and emerging with a new sense of purpose. This battle, as painful as it had become a turning point, a moment of transformation that would shape the rest of my life. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, the third, Becoming a Healer. Cancer had given me a new lease on life, but it also left me with questions, deep, unsettling ones. Why had I developed cancer in the first place? The doctors had done their best to treat my disease, but they couldn't answer the question that gnawed at me day and night. I turned to search engines, medical journals, and even consulted with specialists, but all I received were clinical, impersonal statistics. Being a man, being young, and being in my age group increased my risk. These weren't the answers I was looking for. I wanted to know why this had happened to me specifically. Why had my body betrayed me? The fear of recurrence lingered over me like a shadow. Even though I was declared cancer-free, the possibility that it might come back haunted me. Every survivor knows this fear. The idea that cancer could return, stronger and more aggressive than before, is a cruel reality. I needed to find a way to protect myself, to make sure that cancer wouldn't rear its ugly head again. The answer, I felt, wasn't in the hospital or in another round of chemotherapy. It had to be deeper than that. It was during this time of searching, of sleepless nights and internal turmoil, that a friend introduced me to acupuncture. At first, I dismissed it. How could something as simple as piercing needles into the body cure diseases, let alone prevent cancer? I had been trained in Western science, in the rigor of biotechnology and modern medicine. Acupuncture seemed like an ancient, outdated practice, something for people looking for placebo relief, not real solutions. But my friend insisted, telling me about a doctor he had seen, a man who didn't just heal the body, but understood the intricate connections between mind, body, and spirit. Curiosity tugged at me. I couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of my mind telling me to explore every option. After all, I had nothing to lose. So, one rainy afternoon, I made my way to this acupuncture doctor. I wasn't expecting much. In fact, I was prepared to be disappointed, but something about that moment felt significant, like another, waiting to be connected. The clinic was modest, with soft music playing in the background, a far cry from the cold, sterile environments I had become accustomed to during my cancer treatments. The doctor, a quiet man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, greeted me warmly. He didn't rush through our first meeting, didn't treat me like just another patient. Instead, he sat with me for what felt like hours, asking about my lifestyle, my eating habits, my mental state during and after cancer treatment. He wasn't just interested in my physical health, he wanted to know about my emotional and spiritual well-being. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. This wasn't just about cancer anymore. It was about the whole of me. I want to understand why I developed cancer, I told him. He smiled gently. The body speaks in ways we don't always understand, he said. Sometimes, illness is a result of imbalance, not just physically, but in the way we live, the way we think. That was the beginning. As skeptical as I was, something about his words resonated with me. I agreed to start the acupuncture treatment, though I still wasn't convinced it would work. But after just a few sessions, something shifted. Each needle, placed with precision and purpose, seemed to awaken a dormant part of me. I could feel energy moving through my body in ways I hadn't before. My sleep improved. My mind felt clearer. I began to feel healthier, not just physically but mentally. Week by week, session by session, my faith in acupuncture grew. It wasn't just the needles themselves, it was the philosophy behind them. The idea that health wasn't just about treating symptoms, but about restoring balance to the entire system. I realized that my cancer had been a manifestation of deeper imbalances in my life: stress, improper eating habits, lack of proper rest. All of it had taken a toll on my body, and the cancer had been the final breaking point. Acupuncture helped me understand that healing wasn't just about killing cancer cells. It was about restoring harmony within myself. The more I learned, the more intrigued I became. I asked the doctor countless questions, and each time, he answered with patience and wisdom. He explained the intricate energy pathways in the body, the way acupuncture worked to unblock those pathways and allow the body's natural healing processes to take over. It was as if a new world had opened up to me, one that went beyond the limitations of modern medicine and tapped into something more profound, something that had been practiced for thousands of years. As I continued my treatments, I began to notice changes in my overall health. My energy levels were higher, my digestion improved, and I felt more centered, more in tune with my body than ever before. The fear of cancer coming back, while still present, no longer dominated my thoughts. I realized that I had more control over my health than I had once believed. It wasn't just about external factors, it was about the choices I made every day: how I ate, how I moved, how I thought. Driven by my newfound belief in this ancient practice, I made a bold decision: I would study acupuncture. I had already spent years learning about the human body from a Western perspective. Why not add another dimension to my understanding? I enrolled in a course to become certified in acupuncture, eager to learn everything I could about this remarkable form of healing. It wasn't just about me anymore. I wanted to help others experience the same transformation I had. The more I studied, the more I realized that acupuncture wasn't just about needles and pressure points. It was about a philosophy of life, a way of understanding health as a dynamic, ever-changing balance between the body, mind, and environment. I learned that many chronic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, even chronic pain, could be managed and sometimes even reversed through acupuncture and lifestyle changes. By the time I completed my studies and earned my Doctor of Medicine in acupuncture, I had a new mission in life. Cancer had taken me to the brink, but acupuncture had brought me back. I wasn't just a cancer survivor anymore, I was a healer. And now, it was time to share what I had learned with the world. I opened my own clinic, starting small, treating friends, family, and people from my local community. Word spread quickly about the effectiveness of the treatments. People came to me with chronic conditions, diabetes, back pain, migraines, that they had struggled with for years, and after a few sessions, they began to feel better. It was a humbling experience to see how something so simple, so ancient, could have such a profound effect on people's lives. As I treated more patients, I began to notice something remarkable. Healing wasn't just about the physical body. People would come to me with chronic illnesses, but often, their true pain lay elsewhere. Some had unresolved emotional trauma, others were burdened with stress and anxiety. Acupuncture, combined with a shift in lifestyle, seemed to unlock something within them. It wasn't just about curing diseases, it was about restoring a sense of wholeness. In many ways, I had come full circle. I had started my journey with a desire to understand the body, to contribute to the fight against diseases like cancer. Now, I was doing exactly that, only in a way I had never imagined. I wasn't in a lab, designing molecular structures or studying cellular processes. I was in a clinic, using ancient wisdom to bring balance and healing to people's lives. The answers to my questions about why I had developed cancer had finally come. It wasn't because I was unlucky, or because I fit into some statistical risk group. It was because I had lost balance in my life, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Cancer had been my wake-up call, a reminder that health is not something to be taken for granted. It's something that must be cultivated, nurtured, and protected. And so, the third in my life was drawn, becoming a healer. Acupuncture had not only healed me, but it had given me a new purpose, a new way to give back to the world. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a guide, helping others find their own path to healing. Chapter 6. Chapter 6, Finding the Root Cause. For years after my cancer treatment, the same question echoed in my mind: why did I develop cancer? It wasn't enough for me to accept that it happened. I needed to understand the cause. Was it genetic? Was it bad luck? Or had I unknowingly set the stage for the disease through my lifestyle choices? The doctors, with their sterile, clinical explanations, had provided no real answers. Their data and statistics were just numbers on a page, impersonal and disconnected from my individual experience. Being male increases your risk, they said. Being between 20 and 29 makes you more susceptible. But these facts didn't tell me why I, out of all the people in the world, had developed this life-threatening disease. I had to find out for myself. The fear of recurrence hung over me, and I knew that unless I figured out the root cause, I would never be at peace. My search for answers took me beyond the walls of the hospital, beyond the textbooks I had studied in college. I needed to look deeper, not just at cancer itself, but at how I had lived my life up until the moment the disease took hold of me. As I continued to practice acupuncture, treating patients with chronic conditions, I began to see patterns that I couldn't ignore. Many of the people who came to me with serious health issues weren't just suffering from physical ailments. They were living under the weight of stress, unhealthy diets, lack of proper sleep, and emotional turmoil. It became increasingly clear to me that disease didn't just happen randomly, it was the result of imbalances, of the body struggling to cope with years of neglect. I started to turn my focus inward, examining my own life before cancer. What had I been doing that might have contributed to my illness? I realized that I had been living a life that was out of sync with my body's needs. I had pushed myself too hard, neglecting the basics of health in pursuit of career success and personal goals. I ate on the go, often choosing convenience over nutrition. I stayed up late, working on projects, and thought little about the importance of sleep. My stress levels were constantly high, as I juggled the demands of work and personal responsibilities. The more I reflected, the more obvious it became. My cancer wasn't just the result of one factor, it was a culmination of years of small, seemingly insignificant choices that had added up over time. Poor eating habits, lack of rest, unrelenting stress, these were the real culprits. My body had been trying to tell me something long before the cancer appeared, but I hadn't been listening. In acupuncture, I had learned that health is about balance between mind, body, and environment. Disease, in this view, is not an enemy to be fought, but a signal that something is out of alignment. My cancer was that signal, the ultimate wake-up call that my life needed to change. I began to pay close attention to the choices I made every day. I started with my diet. As a biotechnologist, I understood the biochemical reactions that occur when we eat. I knew how carbohydrates, proteins, and fats were broken down into their molecular components. But knowledge is one thing, and practice is another. I had been eating in ways that undermined my health, too much processed food, not enough variety, and little attention to the quality of the nutrients I was consuming. So, I overhauled my diet. I began to eat mindfully, focusing on fresh, whole foods that would nourish my body rather than deplete it. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins became staples in my meals. I cut out processed sugars, refined carbohydrates, and unhealthy fats. It wasn't just about avoiding bad foods, it was about embracing foods that would support my immune system, help my cells regenerate, and keep my body in optimal condition. Next, I turned my attention to sleep. I had always been the type to burn the midnight oil, staying up late to finish projects or get ahead at work. But I hadn't realized how much damage I was doing by depriving my body of rest. Sleep, I learned, is when the body repairs itself, when cells regenerate, the immune system strengthens, and the mind processes the events of the day. Without quality sleep, the body can't function properly, and over time, this can lead to a breakdown in health. I made sleep a priority, creating a routine that allowed my body to wind down and rest deeply. I turned off electronic devices an hour before bed, practiced deep breathing exercises, and made sure to go to sleep at the same time each night. At first, it was difficult to adjust. My mind, always racing, resisted the idea of slowing down. But as I developed the habit, I began to notice a difference. My energy levels improved, my mood stabilized, and I felt more refreshed and focused throughout the day. Then, there was stress. This was the hardest area for me to address. Like so many others, I had always viewed stress as a normal part of life, something to be endured, not something that could actively harm me. But the truth was that chronic stress had been eating away at my health for years. It affected everything: my digestion, my sleep, my mental clarity, and ultimately, my immune system. I knew I needed to find ways to manage my stress before it managed me. Acupuncture had already introduced me to the idea of balance, and I began to incorporate more mindfulness into my daily routine. I practiced meditation, taking just a few minutes each morning to center myself and breathe deeply. I started spending more time outdoors, reconnecting with nature, and allowing myself moments of stillness. I even picked up yoga, learning how to listen to my body and release tension that had been building for years. As I made these changes, eating better, sleeping more, managing my stress, I began to feel healthier than I had in years. My body responded to the care I was giving it, and the fear of cancer coming back began to fade. I realized that the answer to my question, why did I develop cancer, wasn't a mystery after all. It was a culmination of years of imbalance, of living in ways that were unsustainable for my body and mind. But more than that, my cancer had been a turning point. It forced me to stop, to reflect, and to change. I wasn't just a survivor, I was someone who had taken control of my health, who had learned how to live in harmony with my body rather than against it. And now, I was in a position to help others do the same. The patients who came to my acupuncture clinic often arrived in the same state I had been in, stressed, exhausted, and disconnected from their own health. Many of them had been given the same clinical explanations I had received, but no real answers. As I treated them, I began to see a new pattern emerging. People weren't just sick because of genetics or bad luck. They were sick because they had lost touch with the basics of health, proper nutrition, rest, and balance. And so, I made it my mission to not only treat their symptoms but to help them understand the root causes of their illnesses. I taught them how to eat in a way that nourished their bodies, how to prioritize sleep, and how to manage their stress. It wasn't always easy. Many of them had spent years neglecting their health, just as I had, but I knew from experience that transformation was possible. I began to see incredible results. Patients with chronic conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and even infertility started to improve. Some of them had been told by other doctors that their conditions were irreversible, that they would be on medication for life. But with acupuncture, combined with lifestyle changes, they began to heal. It was as if their bodies were waking up, remembering how to function properly after years of neglect. Through this journey, I found peace. The fear of cancer coming back, while always present in the background, no longer controlled my life. I had discovered the answer I had been searching for, not just why I had developed cancer, but how to prevent it from returning. It wasn't about fighting disease, it was about creating a life of balance, of harmony with my body, mind, and environment. And so, the sixth, my life was drawn, finding the root cause of my cancer and transforming my health through lifestyle changes. This understanding became the foundation of my work as a healer, guiding others on their journey to health, just as I had found mine. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The Healer Emerges. Stepping into the role of a healer was not something I had planned for, but rather something I was drawn to, an inevitable result of my journey through illness, recovery, and discovery. I had survived cancer, I had found the root causes of my illness, and now I was ready to use that knowledge to help others. The transition from patient to healer felt natural, as if every moment in my life had been leading up to this. My clinic started modestly, a small room with minimal equipment, but filled with the same passion I had once poured into my studies. Word spread quickly among my community about the healer who had beaten cancer, and soon, people were coming from all over, not just for acupuncture, but for advice, for guidance, for a way to find balance in their lives. The first few patients who walked through my door were hesitant. They had been to countless doctors, tried various medications, and still found themselves struggling with chronic conditions. Most were skeptical that acupuncture, an ancient practice so far removed from modern medicine, could do anything more than provide temporary relief. But I welcomed them with the same calm, compassionate energy that had drawn me to acupuncture in the first place. I knew what it was like to be at the end of your rope, searching for answers that modern medicine couldn't provide. I had been there myself. The first patient I treated was a middle-aged man with severe back pain, a condition that had plagued him for years. He had tried everything, physical therapy, pain medications, even surgery, but nothing seemed to work. His movements were stiff and painful, and he winced as he sat down in the chair across from me. "I'm not sure how much more of this I can take," he said, his voice tinged with defeat. "Nothing seems to help." I listened carefully, as he described the years of discomfort, the frustration of not being able to live his life fully because of the pain. I could see the weight of it in his eyes, the hopelessness that comes from trying every option and still coming up short. "We'll start with acupuncture," I said, as I prepared the needles. "But I also want to talk to you about your daily habits, how you move, how you rest, what you eat, how you manage stress." He seemed surprised. "You think stress has something to do with my back pain?" I nodded. "Absolutely. Stress affects the body in ways we often don't realize. It tightens the muscles, affects circulation, and prevents the body from healing properly. We're going to work on releasing that tension, both physically and mentally." He agreed, though with a healthy dose of skepticism. I placed the needles gently along his back, targeting key pressure points, and as I did, I explained how acupuncture works. The needles help unblock the energy pathways in the body, allowing the body's natural healing mechanisms to take over. It wasn't just about treating the symptoms, it was about bringing the entire system back into balance. When the session was over, he stood up slowly, testing his movements. I could see the surprise on his face when he realized that some of the tension had already eased. "It's not magic," I said with a smile. "But your body is incredibly powerful. You just need to give it the right conditions to heal." Over the next few weeks, he returned for regular treatments, and we talked about more than just acupuncture. We discussed his eating habits, his stress levels at work, and the way he had been neglecting his body's need for rest and recovery. Slowly, he began to make changes, not just with acupuncture, but with his lifestyle. And as he did, his pain lessened. He regained mobility, and more importantly, he regained hope. This was the first of many such cases. Patients came to me with all kinds of chronic issues: high blood pressure, diabetes, migraines, fertility problems. And time and again, I saw the same pattern. Their illnesses were not isolated issues, but the result of years of imbalance in their lives. They had lost touch with their bodies, with the natural rhythms of health and well-being. Acupuncture, combined with lifestyle changes, was like a reset button, helping them reconnect with their own capacity to heal. One of the most profound experiences came with a woman named Priya. She had been struggling with infertility for several years, and after numerous failed attempts with fertility treatments, she came to me, exhausted and emotionally drained. She had heard about my cancer survival story and hoped that I might be able to help her. "I feel like my body is broken," she said softly during our first meeting. "Like it's betraying me." Her words hit me hard. I understood that feeling all too well, how the body, which should be a source of strength, can sometimes feel like an enemy. But I knew from my own experience that healing was possible. It wasn't about fixing something that was broken, it was about restoring balance. We began with acupuncture, focusing on regulating her menstrual cycle and improving blood flow to her reproductive organs. But, as with all my patients, we also went deeper. I talked to her about her diet, her sleep patterns, and the immense amount of stress she was carrying. Infertility, I explained, often isn't just a physical issue. The body and mind are interconnected, and emotional stress can disrupt the delicate balance needed for conception. Over the next few months, Priya committed herself fully to the process. She attended acupuncture sessions regularly, made changes to her diet, and began practicing mindfulness techniques to reduce her stress. Slowly, her body began to respond. Her cycles became more regular, and she started to feel more in tune with herself. There was a lightness in her that hadn't been there before. Then, one day, she came to my clinic with tears in her eyes. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe it herself. The joy in that moment was indescribable. Priya had not only regained her physical health, she had regained her sense of hope, her belief in her own body's ability to heal and create life. It was moments like this that made every challenge, every setback, worth it. As I continued my work, I realized that healing wasn't just about the needles, or the treatments, or the advice I gave. It was about empowering people to take control of their own health. My role wasn't to fix them, but to guide them toward their own healing. I had been given a second chance at life, and now, I was giving others the tools to transform their own lives. The more I practiced acupuncture, the more I realized that true healing comes from within. It wasn't about external treatments or quick fixes. It was about listening to the body, honoring its signals, and nurturing it with the right care and attention. My patients weren't just receiving treatments, they were learning how to live in harmony with themselves. As my clinic grew, I continued to stay grounded in the principles that had guided me through my own journey: balance, mindfulness, and the belief in the body's innate ability to heal. Each patient who walked through my door reminded me of my own struggle, and each recovery story became anew the picture I was creating. I had come full circle. Cancer had been the catalyst for my transformation, but it was healing others that gave my life meaning. I was no longer just a cancer survivor, I was a healer, a guide, a witness to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. And so, the seventh, my life was drawn, embracing my role as a healer, helping others find their way back to health, and discovering that the power to heal doesn't just lie in medicine, it lies in each of us. Chapter 8. Chapter 8, A New Life, The Struggle to Find Love. After surviving cancer, I thought I had faced the toughest battle of my life. But what I didn't anticipate was the silent war that would come next, finding love as a cancer survivor. In the years following my recovery, I slowly rebuilt my life. I focused on my career, embraced my role as a healer, and found purpose in helping others regain their health. But amidst all that growth, there was one part of my life that remained uncertain, my future as a husband and father. I always knew I wanted a family. The idea of being a husband and raising children had been a dream of mine since I was young. But cancer, as it often does, threw a wrench into those plans. The chemotherapy that saved my life also left me infertile. I didn't know this until several years after my treatment, when a routine semen analysis revealed that I wouldn't be able to father a child naturally. The news hit me harder than I expected. It was a different kind of loss, one that wasn't as immediate as cancer but just as devastating. The doctors explained that at the age of 25, their main focus had been saving my life, and fertility preservation wasn't something they had considered. Had we known earlier, they said, we could have preserved your semen before starting chemotherapy. But that ship had sailed, and now I had to face the reality that I might never have children. I was crushed. For weeks, I wrestled with the weight of this new reality, unsure of how to process it. I had beaten cancer, but this felt like a lingering consequence of the disease that I couldn't overcome. I started to joke about it with friends, laughing off the idea of marriage and children as if it didn't bother me. Maybe I'm meant to live as a bachelor forever, I would say with a smile, but behind that smile was a deep sense of loss. My family, particularly my mother, didn't share that sentiment. She worried about my future and pressed me to consider marriage. I tried to explain that I couldn't give a woman children, but she insisted that there was more to marriage than just having kids. Her concerns weighed on me, and eventually, I agreed to start searching for a spouse. I was clear from the beginning that I would be honest with any potential partner about my cancer and my infertility. It wasn't something I wanted to hide, and I believed that if I was going to build a life with someone, they needed to know the full truth about my past. But what I hadn't expected was how difficult it would be to find someone willing to take that journey with me. Society, especially in India, places a heavy emphasis on family and children. The fact that I had survived cancer was seen as a double-edged sword. People admired my strength, but when it came to marriage, they saw it as a liability. I registered with matrimonial sites, informed my friends and relatives that I was looking for a wife, and even spoke with marriage brokers. Time and again, I faced the same response, rejection. Potential matches would initially be interested, but as soon as they learned about my cancer history and my infertility, they would pull away. You're healthy now, they would say, but what if the cancer comes back? What about children? Even though I assured them that I was in good health and that I was open to exploring adoption or other alternatives, the fear and stigma were too strong. It was a painful process, being seen as damaged, as someone whose past was too complicated to consider for marriage. Each rejection felt like a confirmation of my deepest fears, that cancer had robbed me not just of my health, but of my future. I began to lose hope, wondering if I would ever find someone who could see beyond the disease, beyond the challenges, and accept me for who I was. But then, just as I was beginning to give up, something unexpected happened. One of my cousins, a woman I had grown up with, came forward with a proposal. She knew about my cancer history, about my infertility, and yet, she was willing to marry me. At first, I was taken aback. We had never considered each other as potential life partners, but her offer was genuine. We sat down and had an open, honest conversation. I explained everything to her about my health, my fertility, and the challenges we might face as a couple. I didn't want to enter into this marriage under any false pretenses. But to my surprise, she wasn't deterred. "We'll figure it out," she said with quiet confidence. "We'll face whatever comes, together." Her words gave me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I saw the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by my past. We decided to move forward with the marriage, and though it wasn't the traditional romantic courtship, there was a deep understanding and mutual respect that made me believe we could build a life together. After the wedding, I threw myself into my new role as a husband. The question of children, however, remained. The doctors had been clear that fathering a biological child was unlikely, but by this point in my journey, I had also completed my studies in acupuncture and understood the body in ways I hadn't before. I knew that fertility wasn't just about biology, it was about balance, about creating the right conditions for the body to function optimally. I decided to apply the principles I had learned in acupuncture to my own situation. I began a regimen of acupuncture treatments designed to improve my overall reproductive health. My wife, trusting in my expertise, supported me through the process. We didn't know if it would work, but we were willing to try. And then, just 1 month after our wedding, the impossible happened. My wife became pregnant. I could hardly believe it. After everything the doctors had said, after all the doubts and the fears, we were going to have a child. The joy that filled our home in those early weeks was overwhelming. It felt like a miracle, like life was finally giving me the gift I had thought I would never have. During my wife's pregnancy, I was deeply involved in every step of the process. I guided her through the do's and don'ts of pregnancy, ensuring that she remained healthy and stress-free. I was especially careful about avoiding unnecessary medications, particularly since cancer could have a hereditary component. We followed a natural, holistic approach, and throughout the entire pregnancy, my wife didn't take a single tablet, not even for vitamins or iron. She trusted me completely, and I trusted the process. When our son was born, it felt like the final dot had been connected. The joy of holding my child, of seeing his tiny face and knowing that he was healthy and strong, was indescribable. Against all odds, I had become a father. The long, painful journey of cancer had brought me to this moment, and in my son's eyes, I saw the future, one that was full of hope, love, and possibility. As I watched him grow, I couldn't help but reflect on the twists and turns that had brought me to this point. The cancer, the heartbreak, the struggle to find love, it had all been part of a larger story, one that was still unfolding. My marriage, my son, my work as a healer, all of it had emerged from the ashes of my cancer experience, and for the first time, I felt truly at peace. And so, the 8th, my life was drawn, finding love, overcoming the stigma of being a cancer survivor, and experiencing the miracle of fatherhood. My journey had been far from easy, but in the end, it had led me to a place of deep fulfillment and joy. Chapter 9. Chapter 9, the 4th, Becoming a Father. Becoming a father was a moment that changed everything. When my son was born, it felt like a new chapter of my life had begun, one filled with hope, wonder, and a sense of purpose I had never known before. After the long, grueling battle with cancer, the struggles to find love, and the uncertainty of whether I would ever have children, holding my baby boy in my arms felt like a victory. He was living proof that life could grow from even the darkest places. From the moment he arrived, my world shifted. Every choice I made, every decision, was now filtered through the lens of fatherhood. I wasn't just living for myself anymore, I had a child to care for, to nurture, and to protect. The weight of that responsibility was profound, but it was also the most fulfilling feeling I had ever experienced. The first weeks of my son's life were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and endless moments of awe as I watched him grow and change. I marveled at how perfect he was, his tiny fingers, his curious eyes, the way he instinctively knew how to seek comfort in my arms. Each little milestone, no matter how small, felt monumental. His first smile, his first attempt to grasp my finger, his first sounds, each one filled me with a joy that was impossible to describe. But along with the joy came a sense of responsibility that ran deeper than the practicalities of caring for a newborn. As a cancer survivor, I was acutely aware of the fragility of life, and I knew that I had to be vigilant about my son's health. Cancer had taught me that life could change in an instant, that even the smallest missteps in caring for the body could have profound consequences. And so, from the very beginning, I was determined to give my son the best possible start in life. One of my primary concerns was making sure that my son would not inherit the same health struggles I had faced. Cancer, I knew, could have a hereditary component, and I was deeply committed to doing everything in my power to reduce his risk. During my wife's pregnancy, I had been meticulous about her health, ensuring she ate well, avoided unnecessary medications, and remained stress-free. Now that our son was here, I continued that same level of care, focusing on creating a healthy environment for him to thrive. As a biotechnologist and a healer, I knew how important the early years were in shaping a child's health. I paid close attention to his diet, introducing him to wholesome, natural foods as soon as he was ready to eat solids. I avoided processed baby foods and instead prepared everything fresh, making sure that his meals were rich in nutrients that would support his growth and development. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins became the foundation of his diet, and I took great care to avoid introducing him to sugars and unhealthy snacks. But it wasn't just about what he ate, it was about how he lived. I wanted to make sure that my son's environment was one that encouraged health and wellness, both physically and emotionally. We spent a lot of time outdoors, breathing fresh air and soaking in the sunlight. I made sure he had plenty of time to play, explore, and develop his curiosity about the world around him. Physical activity, I believed, was just as important as nutrition in building a strong, resilient body. Sleep, too, was a priority. I had learned the hard way how vital sleep was to maintaining health, and I wanted to make sure my son developed healthy sleep habits from the start. I created a consistent bedtime routine for him, ensuring that he went to bed at the same time each night and had a peaceful, calming environment to rest in. It was a small but important part of my commitment to his well-being. As the months passed, I watched my son grow stronger, healthier, and more curious with each day. He took his first steps in our living room, his tiny legs wobbling as he gripped my hand for support. I could see the determination in his eyes, the same determination I had felt when I was fighting for my life. He was a fighter, just like me, and I couldn't have been prouder. Fatherhood brought with it a new sense of purpose, but it also brought challenges that I hadn't anticipated. As much as I wanted to be the perfect father, the weight of my own past sometimes crept in. The fear of cancer returning was always there, lurking in the background. I knew the statistics: survivors of cancer often face a higher risk of recurrence, and though I had beaten the disease, the possibility that it could come back was something I couldn't ignore. There were nights when I would lie awake, watching my son sleep, and feel the familiar knot of anxiety in my chest. What if the cancer came back? What if I wasn't around to see him grow up? These thoughts haunted me in the quiet hours of the night, even as I tried to push them away. But in the morning, when I saw my son's smile, when I felt his small hand in mine, I knew that I couldn't live in fear. I had already overcome so much, and I had to trust that my body, my mind, and my spirit would continue to protect me. More than anything, my son taught me about resilience. His innocence, his joy, his unshakable belief in the goodness of the world, it reminded me that life is precious, and that every day is an opportunity to create something beautiful. He didn't see me as a cancer survivor, as someone who had faced death and come out the other side. To him, I was just Dad, his protector, his guide, his hero. As he grew older, I began to share small pieces of my story with him. I told him about the battle I had fought, about the lessons I had learned along the way. But more importantly, I taught him about the value of health, the importance of taking care of his body, his mind, and his spirit. I wanted him to understand that health wasn't something to be taken for granted, it was something to be nurtured, cherished, and protected. Fatherhood wasn't just about raising a child. It was about leaving a legacy, passing on the wisdom I had gained from my own experiences and ensuring that my son would have the tools he needed to live a healthy, fulfilling life. I knew that I couldn't shield him from everything, that life would bring its own challenges and struggles. But I could prepare him. I could give him the foundation of love, support, and knowledge that would carry him through whatever life had in store. And so, the fourth in my life was drawn, becoming a father. It wasn't just about bringing a child into the world, it was about embracing the responsibility of shaping a life, of guiding a new generation, and of finding joy in the simple, profound moments that fatherhood brought. As I watched my son grow, I realized that everything I had been through, the cancer, the struggles, the uncertainty, had led me to this point. I had been given a second chance at life, and now I was passing that gift on to him. I had become more than just a survivor. I had become a father, a healer, and a man who had found peace in the journey that life had laid out for him. Chapter 10. Chapter 10, Embracing the Future. Fatherhood had changed me in profound ways, but it was only part of a larger journey. As I settled into my role as a parent, healer, and survivor, I began to realize that everything in my life, the battles I had fought, the lessons I had learned, was leading me toward a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly live. It wasn't just about surviving cancer anymore. It was about thriving, about embracing every moment with a sense of purpose and clarity that I hadn't fully grasped before. The dots of my life, my education, my illness, my recovery, my work as a healer, and now fatherhood, were all starting to connect, forming a picture that I hadn't seen until now. In my acupuncture practice, I continued to help people find their way back to health, but my approach had evolved. It wasn't just about treating physical symptoms anymore. The more I worked with patients, the more I realized that healing was a holistic process, one that involved the mind, body, and spirit. People weren't just coming to me with aches and pains, they were coming with the weight of years of stress, unresolved trauma, and disconnection from their own bodies. I saw it in their eyes, the same exhaustion, the same sense of hopelessness that I had felt when I was fighting cancer. I understood their pain. I had lived it. And that's why I knew that true healing wasn't about quick fixes or temporary relief. It was about teaching people how to reconnect with their bodies, how to listen to the signals their health was giving them, and how to cultivate balance in their lives. One afternoon, a young woman named Mira came to see me. She had been struggling with anxiety and chronic fatigue for years, and no matter how many doctors she visited or medications she tried, nothing seemed to help. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion, her shoulders slumped under the weight of stress and worry. "I just want to feel normal again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "It's not about feeling normal," I said gently. "It's about feeling whole." She looked at me, confused, and I explained what I had come to realize through my own journey. Your body isn't just reacting to your current situation. It's reacting to everything, your stress, your lifestyle, the way you think and feel. Healing isn't about fixing one thing. It's about creating balance in all areas of your life. We began a series of acupuncture sessions, but more importantly, we started working on changing the way she approached her life. I encouraged her to slow down, to practice mindfulness, to pay attention to the way her body responded to stress. Over time, she began to see changes, not just in her physical health, but in her mental and emotional well-being. Mira's transformation was a reminder of the philosophy I had embraced. Healing is not a destination, it's a process. It's about constantly adjusting, constantly listening to your body and mind, and constantly striving for balance. As my patients healed, I found myself healing alongside them. The scars of my past, the lingering fears of cancer's return, and the emotional wounds that had haunted me began to fade. Each day, I felt more grounded, more connected to my purpose. I was no longer defined by my battle with cancer. That chapter of my life, while significant, had become a part of a much larger story. It was during this time that I began to truly understand the interconnectedness of everything, how our health, our relationships, our work, and our spiritual lives were all woven together in a delicate tapestry. One area of imbalance could affect the whole, and one moment of healing could ripple outward in ways we couldn't always predict. This understanding wasn't just something I applied to my patients, it was something I practiced in my own life. I was more mindful of the way I moved through my days, paying attention to my own health, my relationships, and my emotional well-being. I made time for my family, ensuring that my son grew up in an environment filled with love, joy, and the freedom to explore the world around him. As my son grew older, I watched him with a sense of wonder and gratitude. His laughter, his curiosity, his pure, unfiltered joy for life, it reminded me of what was truly important. He had no fear, no worry about the future. He lived fully in the present, embracing each moment with enthusiasm. And in watching him, I began to adopt that same approach. I had spent so many years fighting, first against cancer, then against the fear of recurrence, and finally against the idea that I wasn't enough because of my past. But now, in this chapter of my life, I was learning to let go of the struggle and embrace the flow of life. The future, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now felt like an open road, one filled with possibility, but not something I needed to control. Fatherhood, healing, and my own journey of survival had all taught me the same lesson. Life is not about what happens to us. It's about how we respond to what happens. It's about the choices we make every day to live in alignment with our values, our health, and our sense of purpose. And so, I began to see my life not as a series of battles to be won, but as a journey of connection to myself, to my family, to my patients, and to the world around me. Each day became an opportunity to deepen that connection, to listen more carefully, and to live more fully. The work I did in my clinic became more than just a career, it became a calling. I wasn't just treating patients, I was helping them rediscover the wholeness that was already within them. I was showing them how to take control of their health, how to nurture their bodies and minds, and how to create a life that was filled with balance and peace. In many ways, I had come full circle. I had started my life with a passion for science, for understanding how the body worked at a cellular level. Then, cancer had thrown my life into chaos, forcing me to look inward and find new ways of healing. Now, as a father, healer, and survivor, I was living out that passion in a way I had never imagined, by helping others find their way back to health, and by living my own life with purpose and gratitude. The future, once filled with fear, now felt like a gift. I didn't know what was coming, but I no longer needed to know. I had learned that life is about connecting the dots, not by looking forward, but by looking back. Each moment, each challenge, each triumph had brought me to this place. And as I looked at my son, my patients, and the life I had built, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. And so, the 10th in my life was drawn, embracing the future with a sense of purpose, balance, and peace. The battles were behind me, and the road ahead was wide open, filled with possibility and hope. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, The Philosophy of Healing. As I entered this new chapter of my life, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, the battles I had fought, the lessons I had learned, and the transformations that had occurred within me. My understanding of health, of healing, of life itself, had shifted dramatically since the day I was first diagnosed with cancer. What began as a fight for survival had evolved into something much deeper, a philosophy of healing that transcended the boundaries of medicine and science. At the core of this philosophy was the belief that healing is not something that happens to us, it is something we cultivate within ourselves. The body, I had come to realize, is an incredible instrument, capable of immense resilience and regeneration when given the right conditions. But true healing, I discovered, goes beyond the physical. It requires balance in all aspects of life, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. In the years following my recovery, as I worked with more patients and became a father, I began to see that health was not just the absence of illness, but the presence of wholeness. Healing was not just about eradicating disease, it was about creating harmony within the body and mind. This understanding was what I aimed to impart to every patient who walked through the doors of my clinic. One patient, Ravi, came to me with a host of issues: chronic migraines, digestive problems, and constant fatigue. He had seen dozens of doctors, tried every medication available, but nothing seemed to work. He was frustrated, defeated, and desperate for relief. After his first acupuncture session, Ravi told me, "I just want to be healthy again. I want to feel like myself." I nodded, understanding his desire. But I also knew that the journey to health wasn't just about eliminating symptoms. Health isn't something we can chase, I explained. It's something we create. It's about balance, finding the right rhythm for your body, your mind, and your spirit. I worked with Ravi for several months, treating him with acupuncture and guiding him through lifestyle changes that would support his overall well-being. Slowly, his migraines became less frequent, his digestion improved, and he began to regain his energy. But what was most remarkable wasn't the disappearance of his physical symptoms, it was the change in his outlook. He began to see health not as a goal to be achieved, but as a dynamic process, one that required daily attention and care. "What I've realized," Ravi told me one day, "is that health isn't just about feeling good. It's about being in tune with myself, understanding what my body needs, and making choices that support that." His words struck a chord with me because they mirrored my own journey. Cancer had forced me to confront my mortality, but it had also given me the opportunity to discover what it meant to truly live. I had learned that health wasn't just about avoiding disease, it was about cultivating a state of balance, a sense of connection to oneself and to the world. As a healer, my role was not to fix people. It was to guide them back to their own inherent capacity for healing. Each person who came to me brought with them their own unique set of challenges, their own stories, their own imbalances. And while acupuncture was a powerful tool, it was only one part of the equation. True healing, I had come to understand, required a shift in mindset, a willingness to listen to the body, to nurture it, and to trust in its ability to heal. This philosophy wasn't just something I practiced with my patients, it was something I lived in my own life. After surviving cancer, I knew I could never take my health for granted. I had to remain vigilant, not out of fear, but out of respect for my body and what it had endured. I continued to prioritize the practices that had supported my recovery: mindful eating, regular exercise, quality sleep, and stress management. But there was more to it than just physical health. I also made time for reflection, for quiet moments of gratitude and connection. Whether it was spending time with my family, meditating in the early morning hours, or simply appreciating the beauty of a sunset, I knew that these moments were just as essential to my well-being as anything else. One evening, after a long day at the clinic, I sat on the porch of my home, watching my son play in the yard. The air was warm, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange as the sun set. My wife sat beside me, and for a moment, we sat in silence, taking in the peacefulness of the moment. This, I thought to myself, is what it means to be healthy. It wasn't just about having a body free of disease. It was about having a life filled with meaning, connection, and presence. It was about the relationships I had nurtured, the people I had helped, and the way I had learned to navigate the challenges life had thrown at me. As I reflected on my journey, I began to think about the legacy I wanted to leave behind, not just for my family, but for the people I had touched through my work. I wanted to be remembered not just as a cancer survivor or a healer, but as someone who had dedicated his life to helping others find their way back to health. This was the gift that cancer had given me. It had shown me that life is precious, that health is not guaranteed, and that we must do everything in our power to live fully, with intention and gratitude. And so, I began to embrace my role not just as a healer, but as a teacher. I started offering workshops and seminars, sharing my philosophy of healing with a wider audience. I spoke about the importance of balance, about how health is not something we can compartmentalize, but something that touches every aspect of our lives. I wanted to empower people to take control of their own health, to see themselves not as passive recipients of care, but as active participants in their own healing journey. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life came to learn, to ask questions, to share their own stories. I realized that what people needed most wasn't just treatment, they needed hope. They needed to know that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always a way forward, always a path to healing. This became my mission, to spread the message that healing is possible, that it is within each of us, waiting to be awakened. Whether it was through acupuncture, lifestyle changes, or simply a shift in mindset, I believed that every person had the power to heal. As my son grew older, I began to share these lessons with him as well. I wanted him to understand that health wasn't just about avoiding illness, it was about living in a way that honored the body, the mind, and the spirit. I taught him how to listen to his body, how to take care of himself, and how to find joy in the simple moments of life. I wanted him to grow up with the knowledge that health is not something we pursue, it is something we create, every day, through the choices we make. And so, the 11th, my life was drawn, living and teaching a philosophy of healing that transcended medicine, that touched the mind, body, and spirit, and that empowered others to take control of their health. This was the legacy I hoped to leave behind, a life dedicated to healing, to connection, and to the belief that we are all capable of creating wholeness in our lives. Chapter 12. Chapter 12, Connecting the Dots. As I sit here today, looking back on my life, I see it not as a series of isolated events but as a tapestry of interconnected moments, each one forming a larger picture that I couldn't see when I was living through it. Steve Jobs once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward." And now, with the benefit of time and perspective, I understand what he meant. In the beginning, my life was about exploration. As a young biotechnology student, I was fascinated by the science of life, by how the body functioned at a molecular level. I wanted to contribute something meaningful to the world, to help unlock the mysteries of human health. But I could never have imagined that my greatest contribution would not come from the lab, but from my own body, from my battle with cancer. When I was first diagnosed, my world shattered. Cancer wasn't just an illness, it was a force that tore through every aspect of my life, leaving nothing untouched. It challenged everything I thought I knew about health, about control, about the future. I remember the fear, the uncertainty, the moments when I didn't know if I would survive. At the time, I couldn't see beyond the immediate struggle, beyond the pain of chemotherapy and the looming shadow of death. But now, looking back, I see that cancer wasn't the end, it was a beginning. It was the first in a series of dots that, when connected, would lead me to a life of purpose and meaning far greater than I had ever imagined. The journey from patient to survivor wasn't easy. There were moments of darkness, of doubt, of despair. But each of those moments was necessary. Each one taught me something I needed to know in order to move forward. Cancer taught me about resilience, about the strength of the human body and spirit, about the importance of mindset in the healing process. It showed me that health is not just something we have, it's something we must cultivate every day, through our choices, our habits, and our attitudes. When I found acupuncture, it was as if another was added to the picture. Acupuncture wasn't just a treatment, it was a philosophy, a way of understanding health that went beyond the physical body. It taught me that healing is not just about eradicating disease, but about restoring balance within the body, within the mind, and within the soul. It showed me that health is a dynamic state, one that we must constantly nurture and protect. As I transitioned from cancer survivor to healer, I began to understand that my journey wasn't just about my own survival. It was about helping others find their way back to health as well. My work as an acupuncturist became a way for me to give back, to share the lessons I had learned, and to guide others on their own healing journeys. And through that work, I found a sense of fulfillment that I had never experienced before. Each patient who came to me was another, the picture, each one with their own struggles, their own stories, their own hopes for healing. I realized that my role wasn't just to treat their symptoms, but to help them reconnect with their own ability to heal. It wasn't just about needles and pressure points, it was about teaching people how to listen to their bodies, how to find balance in their lives, and how to cultivate a mindset of health and resilience. And then came fatherhood, perhaps the most profound dot of all. When my son was born, it was as if everything in my life finally came into focus. After years of struggle, after questioning whether I would ever have a family, I held in my arms a living reminder of hope, of the possibilities that life still held for me. He represented the future, a future I had fought so hard to protect. Becoming a father changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It deepened my understanding of what it meant to live fully, to appreciate the small moments, and to cherish the connections that define us as human beings. It also reminded me of the importance of passing on the lessons I had learned, not just to my patients, but to my son. I wanted him to grow up with an understanding of health that went beyond what most people knew. I wanted him to understand that health is not just about avoiding illness, but about living in harmony with yourself and the world around you. As I reflect on all of these experiences, cancer, healing, fatherhood, I see that they are not separate events. They are all part of the same story, the same journey. Each one is a dot, and when I look back, I can see how they all connect. They form a path, a roadmap that has led me to this moment, to this understanding of what it means to live a life of purpose and meaning. The biggest lesson I've learned is that life is not about control. It's about surrender. It's about embracing the uncertainty, the challenges, and the changes that come our way. It's about trusting that even when things seem dark, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. It's about knowing that no matter how painful or difficult, is part of a larger picture, one that we can't always see in the moment, but one that becomes clear with time. I often think back to that question my friend asked me years ago, why do you call yourself a healer? At the time, I didn't fully understand the answer. But now, I do. I am a healer not because I fix people, but because I help them reconnect with the healer within themselves. I am a healer because I have walked the path of illness, of recovery, of transformation, and I have come out the other side with a deeper understanding of what it means to be whole. The dots have connected. And the picture they form is one of hope, of resilience, of the incredible capacity we all have to heal, to grow, and to thrive, no matter what life throws at us. As I close this chapter of my life, I know that there are still more dots to be added, more connections to be made. The journey is never over. But for now, I am at peace, knowing that I have lived fully, that I have embraced every challenge, and that I have shared my story in the hopes that it will inspire others to do the same. And so, the final, in my life is drawn, connecting all the moments, all the struggles, all the victories, and revealing a life that was not just about surviving, but about truly living.